This afternoon, we've got the heavy wind.
Sylvia Chase, John Quinones, and Renee Poussaint. This is
Travel.
Your tender kisses, I can tell you've never been this far before.
I beg your pardon. I never promised you a rose garden.
Easy loving. Country Memories. CN 40.
I love
From
you.
great love songs
Funny place.
to all
I
time.
need-
If we make it through December.
40 hits, 4 albums.
Let's go to Lutheran Mocktail.
But Country Memories is not in stores. Please order now.
Satin sheets to lie on.
Call 1-800-367-1141 to save all COD charges and pay only $19.98 for records or cassettes or $24.98 for 2 CDs, plus $4 shipping. Use your credit card or send check or money order to Country Memories, P.O. Box 550, Yuma, Arizona. Remember, save all COD charges by sending check or money order or use your credit card.
Jones Show, please call 1-800-FOR-VIDEO. For a transcript, please call Burrell's at 1-800-777-TEXT.
Okay.
I believe you ladies are basically cheap prostitutes because your fee for service is nothing more than a tax write-off on a business account.
Cheap?
$1,700 is not cheap.
My law degree, my law education would be paid for it.
Raise your hand if
You pay taxes on the money you get from these guys.
What do you list on your tax form?
Yeah.
What's your
Yeah.
occupation?
Yes, sir.
Well, I
Quickly.
wouldn't call that
I wanted to
cheap.
ask Elaine, would you still be in love with this guy if he was pumping gas down at the Union 76?
No.
No, they're not denying that. They're not.
Money, darling.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask him, do you realize that you have no love, there's no emotional attachment?
God.
Do you realize you're trading away your lives for absolutely nothing?
And what is it for? Why is it nothing because we don't love you? Why is it nothing because we don't love you? Love don't love nobody, baby.
That's right, and that's right.
Love
Let me
don't
just
love
really
nobody.
answer for them. The guys are getting what they want.
That's right.
They're getting what they want in return. That's why they're doing it. You know what? We are out of time. We're out of time. We're out of time. We got it.
Best Western Inn of Chicago, located just steps from Michigan Avenue. For reservations, call 1-800-557-BEST.
Don't miss it. Dial Tour and Tour West Travel's second annual Tour and Travel Show. Today, Yuma Civic and Convention Center, main hall from noon till 7 p.m. Lots of info, prizes, and fun.
People come from all across America to buy from Beaudry RV Center. In fact, Beaudry has customers from every state in the Union. At Beaudry RV, you'll find the largest selection of Fleetwood products in one location in the entire United States. There's no city sales tax. And satisfying customers is a top company priority. Beaudry RV Center, the world's #1 Fleetwood dealer. When you do things right, the rest just follows.
Diabetes affects 14 million Americans, with half of them not even knowing they have the disease. Heredity, aging, and obesity may lead to developing diabetes. Maintaining proper body weight, a healthy diet, and regular exercise are the best methods of controlling the effects of diabetes. For more information, call the American Diabetes Association, contact your physician, or talk to any Long's pharmacist. At Long's Drugs, we're working for a healthy community.
KYMA Eyewitness News, the only station with live I-11.
Today on Ricki Lake.
It's really hard because he'll be walking around in his pajamas and his little robe.
Roommate love.
I'm in love with you.
Surprise, Lance.
I've known you for almost 2 years now.
So, what do you think of that?
Oh, I don't know.
This show is about people coming on and telling their roommates that they're in love with them.
Wow. Oh, I wasn't expecting it.
Surprise, I love you. to look high and low and go to great lengths to find the apple of their eye. But my guest today didn't have to look far for love. Meet Michelle, Tony, Meredith, Patrick, and Ezra. Believe it or not, they all found love right in the comfort of their own homes. But there's one slight problem. The people they are in love with happen to be their roommates, and their roommates don't even know about it. But that's all going to change today because my guests are about to tell their roommates, I'm in love with you. On today's show, found love closer to home than you might expect it. In fact, they found love in their homes. You see, they're in love with their roommates. And boy, are their roommates gonna be surprised. Am I right, audience? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Please meet Michelle. Michelle has been living with her roommate, Lance, for 3 months and says she loves him so much. She wants to spend the rest of her life with him. She just hasn't told him yet. Really, Michelle?
Very true.
Tell us a little bit about Lance.
Well, Lance is my best friend, first of all, and I think that's the most important thing about him. And it was a very sudden thing. For so many years, I was totally absent without any kind of emotion, and then I meet this person, pow, and I just love him with all my heart. A very spiritual thing.
So did you know right away? I mean, when he moved in or you moved in with him?
I've known him for 3 years. I was already in love with him, and he moved in. He's like, I need, let me move in. I'm like, oh, okay, good idea, So it just kind of.
So what's it like for you? I mean, I know, like, living with someone, you see them day in, day out. When he gets out of the shower.
Yeah, and it's really hard because he'll be walking around in his pajamas and his little robe and everything. I'm like, oh.
You just want to jump his bones, don't you?
It's really.
I'm guessing.
That would be easy. That would be totally easy to get over, but that's just icing on the cake. My feelings for Lance they're grounded in emotion and his spirit and his intellect more than his body or what he looks like.
Do you think he has an inkling?
He knows that I love him, but he doesn't know that I love him. You know what I mean? So.
And you want to spend the rest of your life with him. You want children?
I do, very much.
Are you nervous doing this on TV?
Yeah.
I mean, how would you all feel if it was you up there? Nervous, huh? Wow.
Getting shot down in front of millions of people. Hey.
Okay. Well, we're going to go get Lance, okay? Now, while we're doing that, I wanted to explain to the audience, he thinks he's here to talk about roommates and being friends. And is it possible for men and women to be friends, remain friends? Am I right?
Right.
So, boy, will he be surprised. What would you do? Stand up, sir, if someone did this to you.
I'd be real surprised,
But would you kill them? Would you kill them?
No, I'd be...
Oh, are you afraid he's going to kill you?
Well, he's just so, there's so many people. He's just be going.
In the U.S. before coming to Florida in 1988, he did enter a 3-year residency program at the Lutheran Medical Center in Cleveland, but he was thrown out within months. As for Matthew Simmons, hours went by as Dr. Mangalapudi tried to figure out what to do. Eventually, Matthew simply bled to death.
Yeah, he laid there 4.5 hours in the emergency room, which he shouldn't have been there no more than 45 minutes. If everybody would have done their job, he would have been out and been with us today.
Dr. Julian Loeb, a former emergency physician who investigates malpractice claims, has looked into the case in connection with a lawsuit that the parents of Matthew Simmons have filed against Dr. Mangalapudi. He says Dr. Mangalapudi was thrown out of his residency program for being, quote, incompetent, sloppy, uninterested, and dishonest. As for Matthew Simmons,
It was a needless death. It was a situation in which, for want of a qualified emergency doctor, I think more than anything else, this boy died.
It was a firm called National Emergency Services, with headquarters nearly 3,000 miles away in the suburbs of San Francisco, that sent Dr. Mangalapudi to work in Okeechobee.
I would be willing to bet you that the administrator of that hospital would not take his child to Dr. Mangalapudi if he was sick. And I would be willing to bet you that the medical director for that region for National Emergency Services would not take his child to Dr. Mangalapudi if he was sick. And yet they're willing to place that doctor in that emergency room and allow the public to bring their families to him.
And NES wasn't the only firm to hire Dr. Mangalapudi. He also worked for Coastal Healthcare Group and Spectrum Emergency Care, which, by the way, is part of the ARA Group, a firm that also runs cafeterias and provides cleaning services. Dr. Keeney, who has written a book called The Rape of Emergency Medicine, says in their rush to fulfill their contracts, some contract management companies have hired unqualified, even dangerous doctors, doctors with all sorts of problems.
Personal problems, alcoholism, drug addiction, problems that are beyond their control. The neurosurgeon who may have gotten rheumatoid arthritis. Somebody who can no longer practice their specialty because of an ailment. Physicians with psychiatric problems.
Sex offenders?
Absolutely.
Doctors who have lost one malpractice case after another?
Lots of them.
Doctors who have departed or been thrown out of the residencies?
Oh, and be made the director of an emergency department within a month.
Now, why would a contract group hire such doctors? The answer is money. Some small hospitals, especially in rural areas, cannot afford to pay much, and the contract groups have their profit margin to worry about.
It's often necessary to find a doctor who will work for $25 or $30 an hour. And most of the doctors...
$25 or $30 an hour?
Yes.
For an emergency room doctor?
There are situations in which the emergency room doctor is making less money than some of the contract nurses who are being brought in to staff the hospital.
Well, why are they willing to work for such low wages?
Probably because they can't get a job anywhere else.
For instance, take Dr. William Allman. He had been thrown out of his residency program at Eisenhower Army Medical Center in Georgia for improper sexual conduct with a female patient. He was disciplined by the State Board of Medicine, yet he was put to work at a hospital anyway.
And in that process, he was seeing women, he was doing pelvic exams, and in fact, he was doing the employee physicals for the hospital.
It wasn't long before he was in trouble again.
Are you guilty of what they're accusing you of, doctor?
For sexually abusing 3 more women he was examining. Dr. Allman, by the way, is now prohibited from treating any more female patients. And then there's Dr. Glenn Gingold. He was found to be addicted to narcotics. He admitted he falsified insurance forms to get drugs, and he was barred from prescribing controlled substances. Yet he was hired by Coastal Healthcare Group to work in an emergency room, too, for $28 an hour.
Dr. Gingold told us himself that the contract groups he's worked for, quote, just want a warm body. They don't care who it is. He said, 30% of the time in the emergency room, I was almost incontinent out of fear because I didn't have a clue what I was doing. I was afraid I might kill someone.
And one day, while on duty at a hospital in Blue Ridge, Georgia, Dr. Gingold examined 6-week-old Haley Hosier, concluding she had a throat infection. But the next night, little Haley was dead of meningitis. Dr. Gingold later gave up his medical license after being arrested for drunk driving. He pled guilty to a lesser charge. He is now being sued for malpractice, but he insists he has never provided anything but the best of care to his patients. Dr. Loeb says that emergency room patients are at risk because they have no way of knowing in advance the qualifications of the doctors there.
There are plenty of highly qualified, fine emergency physicians in this country and plenty of excellent emergency rooms. The problem is not that we don't have that. The problem is that we also have an alternative, other emergency rooms that are not qualified, and physicians who are not qualified in those emergency rooms, and no way for you to know.
In fact, since contract groups as such are not monitored by any federal or state agencies, no one knows just how many problem doctors are out there, whether they're the exception or the rule. And none of the groups were willing to talk about their business on camera.
Spectrum told us on the telephone that the way in which they screen and hire doctors is private, between them and the doctors. The head of National Emergency Services, Dr. Alan Rappaport, first told us he was too busy to talk, and then he said his lawyers warned him to keep quiet since his company has been hit with a number of malpractice suits. Then we received a letter from an attorney saying that NES doctors are hit with an average of 56 malpractice claims each year from the 1.6 million patients they see each year. Far less NES claims than the national average for emergency physicians. The letter went on to say that the company is painstakingly careful to hire high-quality doctors, but said it's the hospital that has the final say over who works in the emergency room. NES declined to discuss Dr. Mangalapudi or explain how a doctor who had never completed any medical training at all in the U.S. had slipped through this painstaking process.
As for Coastal Healthcare Group, they told us that their doctors successfully treat more than 4 million patients a year. They said the quality of their doctors and the care their patients receive is, quote, not compromised for any reason. Coastal has contracts with more than 3,000 doctors, many of whom they say are the best in the country. Hospital chiefs of staff, they say, and leaders in the field of emergency medicine.
But what about doctors like Mangalapudi and Allman and Gingold, all of whom worked for Coastal at one time or another? Well, the company didn't want to talk about them. And what could they say to someone like Anna Gray and her 3 children, Candace, Stephanie, and Eric?
I always thought that the best doctors are in the emergency rooms because that's where traumas, that's what they're handling. They're handling life and death situations.
It was a life and death situation for Donald Gray, a sergeant in the Air Force. When he suddenly took ill, Air Force medics were called. Todd Stern, Anna Gray's attorney, says an EKG showed there was trouble.
And they realized that he's ash gray in color, he's clutching his chest, he has chest pain, he's sweating profusely, and he's got a totally erratic heart rate.
So they quickly take him to the emergency room because he's got to go to the hospital.
Right. And in at least their view, were pretty convinced that he was in the midst of a heart attack.
Sergeant Gray was brought to the emergency room at Walker Memorial, a civilian hospital in Avon Park, Florida. He was examined by the doctor on duty, but a short while later he was told it was okay to go home.
I said, doctor, are you sure? And he goes, yeah, he can go home. I said, shouldn't you keep him here? He had chest pains. He says, no, everything is fine. I said, what if the pain comes back? He says, oh, just give him Tylenol.
3 hours later, Don Gray suffered a massive heart attack and could not be revived. This is the doctor who sent Donald Gray home, Dr. Julius Garner, who not only worked in the emergency room, but was also the regional medical director for Coastal Healthcare Group.
And he was also responsible for quality control of the emergency room physicians in the hospitals they worked in.
But was he qualified for such responsibility? Well, back in 1982, Dr. Garner had taken the emergency medicine exam, but he failed. 5 years later, he tried again and failed again.
And Coastal still made him the regional medical director for emergency rooms?
Yes.
Dr. Garner was later sanctioned by the Florida Board of Medicine for failing to properly treat Donald Gray. It was the second case in which the state determined he should have hospitalized a patient in urgent need of medical care. Dr. Garner did not want to talk to us on camera, but he told us he's only human and therefore not perfect. He said that he has seen over 100,000 patients in his career and shouldn't be judged by just one. He said he works hard to be the best possible doctor he can be, and he has now passed the emergency medicine exam. But Dr. Keeney says that finding the best doctors doesn't seem to be the first priority of the contract groups.
Where Coastal and NES and Spectrum crossed the boundary was in the 80s when they took their profit and loss statement and they applied it to a medical profession. And the profit and loss statement took preeminence over anything else.
And, says Dr. Keeney, that continues today. Coastal Healthcare Group boasts its net income was up 43% last year. And this man, Dr. Stephen Scott, who founded Coastal and once ran it out of his kitchen, is today worth nearly $200 million.
What does the AMA say about this? What are...
Oh, please.
What?
The AMA?
Yeah.
The old boys in Chicago? What do you want me to do? Pull them out of their executive dining rooms? Push them into reality? You know, you're a hard man, Wallace. You know, you could give those old boys a stroke. The AMA is not going to make a decision on this. This is a tough ethical decision that involves hundreds of millions of dollars a year.
The AMA told us that regulating the contract groups is just not their responsibility. Critics of the industry say what's really needed is federal legislation to limit the profits of the groups. Less money for the companies, they reason, will mean more money to hire better doctors.
What's IBM doing for customers these days? Ask Nordic Track.
We get orders 24 hours a day, so our systems have to be up all the time. IBM makes sure they are.
Ask Callaway Golf.
IBM computers helped us start growing. Now their consultants help us manage our growth.
Ask Nike.
We wanted a laptop on the leading edge of technology. IBM delivered with the ThinkPad.
You want people who really help you? Talk to us. There's never been a better time to do business with IBM.
1993, we designed a new car. We created a new class. We developed new engineering. We created a new standard of performance. We redefined value, introducing the C-Class. It wasn't designed to compete with other cars. It was designed to replace them. The new C-Class, starting at under $30,000.
Of all the credit cards out there, only one has Smart Rate, now as low as 14.9%, and no annual fee. Discover Card. It's a better deal. It pays to discover. This holiday season, while you're shopping, we'll be dropping $5 million in the Discover Card Big Payback. Now, every time you use your card, you're automatically entered in our $5 million sweepstakes. It pays to discover the card with the big payback.
What's the problem with some of the fish you buy? We'll show you.
Plus, we'll look at the best toy values for your children.
Tomorrow on CBS This Morning, breakfast for your head.
Remember when?
They say that you are cold, remote.
They're the interviews.
Why are you interviewing me then?
That made television history.
When I insult Elizabeth.
You bloody well have.
Go one-on-one with Mike Wallace, Bob Costas, and Barbara Walters.
He's a wonderful, loving husband.
Monday.
13 years ago, the Drug Enforcement Administration came up with a new way to fight its war against drugs, a sting called Operation Swordfish. Here's how it worked. The DEA opened a bogus investment company in Miami to lure big-time drug traffickers to launder their money by investing in stocks, bonds, and real estate, assets the DEA could later seize. To make the sting work, the DEA would need an undercover spy good enough to infiltrate the Colombian drug mafia. The DEA found their confidential informant, that spy they needed, in Cuban immigrant Robert Darius. Or rather, he found them.
Economically, I needed a job. It didn't matter if it was $1,000 a month, $2,000 a month, or $200,000 a month. I needed a job, and that's what I asked them for.
Bob Darius walked into the DEA one day and basically said, where do I sign? I want to be a DEA agent.
Miles Malman was the federal prosecutor who tried and won 2 major drug cases based on Darius's work in Operation Swordfish.
Your typical informant is someone who is arrested and then is pressured by the authorities into cooperating. Darius was not like that. He didn't have the baggage that many informants have of the substantial criminal record. Secondly, he's very intelligent, and he's very articulate, very convincing, very charming. He was a businessman. He was a salesman, and he was a good salesman.
A good salesman with tax problems. After failing to pay $29,000 in taxes from a bungled real estate deal, he was sentenced to 2.5 months in jail. Years later, with interest and penalties, that $29,000 had become almost $300,000.
I was desperate, and I felt that after thinking and thinking what I'm going to do now.
That's when he turned to the DEA and became a spy. Because of his undercover work, Darius and his wife Amelia are still afraid the Colombian drug mafia will try to kill them. They agreed to be interviewed only if they could be disguised.
We were already in a desperate situation, and when the opportunity arose that he could work for the government, we saw that as a light at the end of the tunnel. because we were in very bad shape financially and emotionally.
So Darius needed the DEA as much as they needed him. It seemed the perfect match. Darius knew Miami, where he lived, and Colombia, where he had once worked as a legitimate businessman. The DEA set up its phony investment company in this Miami Lakes office complex. Darius was paid $4,000 a month to help lure drug traffickers here, where they could be secretly recorded making transactions to launder money. The woman on this tape was one of the biggest fish hooked in the swordfish sting, Marlena Navarro. Prosecutors called her the chief financial officer in North America for one of the world's biggest Colombian cocaine cartels. They said her job was to launder and transport drug money back to Colombia and to help coordinate the distribution of cocaine. Never for a minute did she suspect Darius was a DEA agent.
I trust him very deeply. I didn't have brothers, so for me he was my big brother. I trusted him so much, and I didn't have quite reason to have a suspicious about something going wrong.
But something did go wrong for Navarro. The drug money she laundered through Darius led the DEA to more than 36 arrests and the seizure of hundreds of pounds of cocaine and millions of dollars in assets. She got a 32-year prison sentence, and her boss, Colombian drug kingpin Carlos Alvarez, got 45.
I've described Darius's role in these cases as significant, critical, and his performance was, as an informant or as an operative or as a witness, was heroic.
Heroic?
Yes.
Why?
Because Darius had been threatened. His family was living under great pressure. His marriage and personal life was suffering. And he was suffering all of these misfortunes as a result of his participation.
It's been horrible. And the betrayal was very deep. And so when you go to a war, and this can be considered a type of war, you don't think you're going to be betrayed by your own side. And we were.
Why do they feel betrayed? For his dangerous and productive work, Darius says the DEA made 3 promises. They would pay him full salary through all the swordfish trials, pay him a $100,000 bonus, and most importantly, they would eliminate his tax problem. So the bottom line was that they said they would pay you through the trial. You say they did not.
No.
They said they would give you a bonus. You never got that bonus.
No.
They said they would take care of your IRS problem. Did they?
They didn't. I took care of my IRS problem.
He was compensated, I think, fairly.
Robert Bonner ran the Drug Enforcement Administration from 1990 until just recently. He was not at the DEA during Swordfish, but the agency declined our request to interview the agents who worked with Darius.
I realize Mr. Darius is dissatisfied with the amount of compensation he received, but I think a good many people will think that, you know, this is taxpayers' money too. They may think we paid him too much.
So what was Darius paid by the DEA? Their receipts show that they did not pay him through the trials as promised. They stopped paying his salary in March of 1984, 3 years before he finished testifying in his 6th and last swordfish trial. That means that Darius's income averaged about $25,000 a year for his 6-year DEA obligation, about half of what Darius says they promised. In addition, he says the DEA reneged on its commitment to solve his tax debt and give him a bonus.
And I think DEA made every possible effort to come through on those things, both with respect to the IRS liability, the lump sum payment of $100,000. He ultimately was paid $73,000,
which
went right to the IRS to settle that tax claim.
Which didn't solve his tax debt, by the way.
I mean, well, I understood that it had totally resolved his tax liability.
It didn't. In addition to turning over the bonus check, Darius had to agree to pay the IRS a hefty percentage of his income for another 6 years. And remember, his original tax debt was $29,000. I wouldn't call that taking care of my tax problem.
My understanding had been that his tax liability that he had when he first arrived at DEA's door back in around 1981 had been totally resolved with this payment. That may not be the case, in which case that's news to me.
Not only did the DEA fail to solve Darius's tax debt, but according to IRS policy, the DEA was not authorized to make that kind of promise in the first place. So that either the DEA agents didn't know what they were doing, or they lied to Darius.
No, I don't think so. I mean, we did intervene, and we do intervene on occasion.
Well, they say that they're not supposed to make those kinds of promises.
Well, yeah, we don't have authority to compromise a civil tax claim. That's true. DEA doesn't have that. Only the IRS has that.
Most informants are going to be used until they're used up. And Roberto Darius falls into that category.
Alcee Hastings, now a congressman, was the judge in both the Alvarez and Navarro trials. Do you think he was treated fairly by the Drug Enforcement Administration?
Absolutely not. I knew just as sure as shooting that he was going to be put in the streets. That once they have used him, they're going to throw him out, and he's going to be left to his own devices. Thus, I suspect wherever he is today, there are guns in his nightstand and padlocks on his door and constant paranoia. This happens over and over again with snitches.
Hastings is no stranger to snitches and informants. He was once the target of a government informant in a bribery investigation that resulted in his removal from the bench. If he was made promises by the DEA, and he is a snitch, are they bound to keep those promises?
Only if it's in writing. Only if it's in writing.
The DEA's promises are not in writing, but they are on tape. To the surprise of the DEA, Robert Darius not only recorded his conversations with the bad guys, the drug dealers, he also recorded all of his phone conversations with the good guys, the DEA agents. Author David McClintock relied upon over 300 hours of those tapes to write a book on Operation Swordfish.
The audio tapes document and prove that the promises were made, not once, but repeatedly. Over time, the accumulation of winks, nods, arched eyebrows, and explicit statements add up to promises. And on several occasions, they were quite explicit.
As in this taped excerpt from one of Darius's conversations with Agent Carol Cooper.
Hopefully at the end, we can take care of your tax problem, number one.
Right.
I think whatever you get at the end, you're going to be able to live very, very comfortably as far as, taking care of you in the meantime during the trial.
Right.
I don't think there's any problem with any of that.
This is the worst nightmare of a government spy bureaucracy, to have one of its spies, in effect, turn around and spy on the people controlling him.
Making those audio recordings was illegal in Florida. So why did Darius risk a felony conviction to record the agents in the first place? He says he needed insurance after DEA agents lost evidence, botched assignments, and began fighting among themselves.
As soon as they started creating problems in the office and arguments in the office, and I realized that I was dealing with little kids, not with men, I thought, these guys are handling a lot of money, and if something goes wrong, I am going to be the one who's going to be blamed for everything. Besides the fact that they told me, tape everybody. And they didn't realize that by everybody, they were including themselves.
Anybody who volunteers his or her services to a United States government spy bureaucracy or law enforcement bureaucracy had better watch out, because it is in the nature of that bureaucracy to treat the individual badly after it has gotten whatever it wants from him or her. That is the unfortunate fact of life.
Well, I'd hate for that message to be the message that was sent out, because DEA does get information from a lot of different sources. We do pay money for that information on occasion. Sometimes it's just good and interested citizens who want to provide information to DEA. And I think we try to take care of people that do help us.
But Darius says the DEA hasn't taken care of him. Since 1984, he has been supported by his wife. She works, and help from her family. He's worked only occasionally and still lives in seclusion in Florida. Robert, you feel that the government let you down?
Yes. I would like them to pay what they owe me. But even if they don't, I don't want them to do the same thing they did to me to anybody else.
Amelia, what do you want now from the government?
I want to be forgotten. All it has brought me is pain and misery. I don't want them even to remember me, that I ever existed.
And that's the opposite of what you want.
I want them to remember me forever. Really, and I'm going to make sure that they remember me for a long time.
Darius has refused the DEA's offer to go in the witness protection program, and he plans to sue for the money he says they owe him. As for Marlena Navarro, after almost 8 years in prison, she was granted a new trial because of administrative errors in the court transcription. But Darius says he won't testify against her unless he's subpoenaed. And that's not likely to happen since the federal prosecutors have now agreed to a plea bargain with Navarro that could see her out of prison next year.
Lurgents, and they make lures for fishing.
It's a family company that's been manufacturing lures for 60 years.
It's like a family. We're like a family.
My first call, the response was, we're using AT&T and we're happy.
One day he called me and said, now I got to talk to you about this because I'm going to save you some money.
I learned that there were some business solutions we could provide.
I didn't realize some of the things that could be done. Nobody ever explained it to me before.
AT&T is so large. With MCI, I feel like we're their #1 customer.
He packs heavy. She packs light. She wears silk. He wears wool. He's comfortable at 68 degrees. She prefers 72. Good thing they own a Buick Park Avenue with available dual-zone climate control. 72 for her, 68 for him. Too bad everything isn't as accommodating as Park Avenue. From Buick, the new symbol for quality in America.
You build a new razor with precision heads to shave below the skin in comfort. And what do you get? Cut a precision groove to help the Norelco lift and cut system shave even closer. And what do you get? Build a razor that shaves closer, smoother than ever before. And what do you get? The new Norelco razors, our closest shave ever.
60 Minutes, a CBS News weekly magazine, will continue.
Monday. Come to Ponderblue's Barbecue Village.
Will new advertising become Ponder's obsession?
I want to know what Ponder put in his sauce to make you all do that.
Evening shade. Then someone or something has moved into Dave's house.
There's a cold spot here.
A cold spot? Near the door? What are the odds? All new Dave's World after Evening Shade Monday.
Her reality is slipping away.
Don't touch me! Don't touch me!
Can her husband find out why before it's too late? Based on the shocking true story. Valerie Bertinelli, Murder of Innocence, Tuesday.
This is CBS.
Once again, I'm here to prove cats prefer Whiskas, made with great stuff like USDA-approved beef, over a tempting little treat like myself. But maybe you're saying, I don't think the cat even sees him. All right, then. How do you explain these temptations? I hope you're satisfied. Thank you.
Cats love the real neat taste of Whiskas. Cats would buy Whiskas.
Well, not very many people really know this, but the best way to play at Keno is to play your birthday.
I play my birthday sometimes. Just keep playing your birthday.
I play my birthday all the time.
I'm the one that has the lucky birthday.
Well, personally, I like to play my birthday.
Use some birthdays.
I play birthdays.
You play birthdays, birthdays, birthdays.
We like to play our birthdays.
Whatever you do not play your birthday. Wrong Amundo will not work.
Mike Donahue and Shirley Hancock, weeknights on Newsroom 6.
If you're going to go bankrupt and you don't want to leave the United States, there's really only one place to go: Florida. People come here to play golf. People come here to play tennis. And people come here to go broke. Florida's bankruptcy courts are overflowing with cases. Rich people particularly know they can keep a whole lot more of their money and property here than they would almost any place else. The word is out. Florida is a debtor's paradise.
Bankruptcy court may help you.
I get at least 5 calls a week from lawyers around the country who know that I practice bankruptcy law, and they say, I have this client who has money, and creditors may be after them shortly or are after them, and we've heard about Florida. Is it really true?
Chuck Tattlebaum is taking all those calls in his law office in Clearwater.
And then when I tell them that it is really true, they all want to run down here and take up residence.
You get to keep everything?
Not everything, but if you do plan the right way, you can keep virtually everything.
He's right. Of all 50 states, Florida has the most generous exemptions. In other words, the longest list of what a debtor, no matter how much he owes, is able to keep.
If you have an IRA or pension benefits, they're totally protected. Life insurance value is protected.
Really? It doesn't matter how big the insurance policy is?
Not at all. Annuities are protected. So you've taken all your cash and put it into annuities. That's protected.
And the biggest protection of all in Florida, the mother of all exemptions, is the law that lets debtors keep their houses, and not just run-of-the-mill houses. Gary Freud went bankrupt in 1987, and yet look where he lives. He still owns this upscale Spanish-style house on exclusive waterfront property. Donald Claus, the man who owns this house on the golf course in Fort Myers, went bankrupt too. And so did Marvin Warner, who lives on this thoroughbred horse farm in Ocala.
Your house in Florida would be exempt if it's within a certain acreage, no matter what its value.
Well, up to how many acres?
Well, if it's in the city, only a half an acre. But if it's out in the country, it's up to 160 acres.
You're kidding.
No.
So I just move myself down here. I buy a nice house with 160 acres and pour all my money into it. And I don't have to pay my debts?
That's what the law says. It's not right, but that's what the law is. And right now, that's what the courts have to enforce. My creditor clients, just all over the country, are just amazed at this. And they just say, how can it be?
How can it be that this, it can't possibly be just one house, is the home of a former high-flying Wall Street financier who's known these days as Florida Bankruptcy Case 91-10466-8P7, Paul Bilzerian.
Is it unfair to call you a corporate raider?
I hate that term.
I figured you would hate that term.
Bilzerian's last corporate raid in 1988 was on the billion-dollar Singer Sewing Machine Company. A year later, he was convicted of securities fraud and went to jail for 14 months. The Singer Company went bankrupt. Bilzerian, who once boasted he was worth $80 million, declared personal bankruptcy in 1991. But he still got to keep that house. It's actually in his wife's name. But in Florida, he could have kept it even if it weren't.
How much did you pour into that house? We've seen $10 million. Is that ballpark?
No, I think that's high.
$6 million?
I think that's closer.
Is the house fully paid for?
Yes.
So you don't have mortgage?
No.
The Bilzerians didn't invite us over for a close-up look at the house, so we found a pretty good vantage point across this lake. As you can see, the mansion looks more like Bilzerian University than a single-family home. Over here, behind those trees, is the guest house, which is a fabulous mansion all by itself. The whole complex has 21 bathrooms, an indoor squash court. At this end, there's a full-size basketball court with bleachers and an electronic scoreboard. And this man says he's broke.
So are you broke?
Well, I guess in a manner of speaking, I guess I would have to be. If your liabilities exceed your assets, I guess you'd have to be defined as broke.
So what does he live on? When the dust settled from the Singer Company bankruptcy, Bilzerian ended up owning this $100 million furniture company. But there's no way his creditors can get at it now, because now the owner and chairman of the Singer Furniture Company is Mrs. Paul Bilzerian.
You appointed her to take your place?
Yes.
Yes. And in that position, she earns $300,000 a year.
That's correct.
Which, And that's certainly a healthy amount of money for any family to live on. You would not disagree.
No, no.
So you're not broke.
Well, as long as my wife stays married to me, I'd say that that's probably right.
As they would be in many other states, her salary and stock in the company are totally protected from his creditors.
I mean, people say this man should pay his bills. If he can have a house like that, he should pay his bills.
Well, you have to look at who would be saying that. I mean
anybody.
But
I will say that.
all right, but then you got to look at the bills.
So we looked at the bills. They total more than $100 million. The U.S. government alone wants around $80 million. Bilzerian says the bills are bogus. He believes the entire case against him is unfair.
So I look at my largest creditor and I say, if my largest creditor doesn't get paid a dime, that will not break my heart. Now, if that was a bunch of little workmen out there, people who'd worked on my house, little guys out there that had lost money, Leslie, I believe probably my wife and I would be doing everything in our power to pay that, regardless of the law.
And you don't know anybody like that, is what you're saying?
Nobody. Nobody.
Not one little person?
Not one little guy.
Try telling that to these little guys. Paul Ganaway and Charlie Bohannon both worked for the Singer Company for more than 30 years, then watched it go bankrupt after Bilzerian's takeover. Now they and thousands of other Singer retirees have seen their company life insurance cut in half. And they're having to pay hundreds of dollars for health insurance the company had promised would be free. Although they are not creditors in Bilzerian's personal bankruptcy, they blame him for the loss of their benefits, and they're angry about what he's been able to keep. The Ganaways and the Bohannons live just a few miles from Bilzerian. They had heard about his house, but they had never seen it until we showed it to them.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
Isn't that amazing?
Oh, boy. Goodness.
What a place. How many bathrooms you say they had?
21 bathrooms.
It looks like a castle.
I stayed in a lot of hotels smaller than that. And what would happen if they flushed all those commodes at one time?
So what are you thinking as we're standing here looking at maybe one of the biggest houses in the country?
I'm thinking that it's unfair that he's able to do that. The Florida law is so lax in allowing him to keep that home under bankruptcy.
Seems to me that the laws should protect the people who are, they've spent their life working for this company and thinking that when they were old and retired and unable to work, that they'd be provided for by their insurance that they've paid into all these years. And now that's taken away and they're having to pay a large amount for their insurance to be protected. And I don't think that's fair.
And he
has the money.
80 miles away in Ocala, another bankruptcy. Businessman Marvin Warner. In 1985, not long after the collapse of the Ohio bank he owned, Warner paid $3.5 million cash for this 400-acre horse farm. Remember, Florida law only protects 160 acres. And guess what? That's exactly what Warner kept for himself. He transferred the other 240 acres to his wife and son. Warner filed for bankruptcy in 1987 and eventually settled, mortgaged the farm, and paid back about $16 million of the $100 million his creditors claimed he owed them.
But he got to keep that huge estate with all his thoroughbred horses.
That's correct.
While our 60 Minutes crew was filming the farm, Dr. Gene Hill, the veterinarian who takes care of those thoroughbred horses, drove through the gate. When producer Rome Hartman told him about our story, it set him off.
There's people that owe me $20,000-$25,000 around here that are driving around in a limo and eating lunch at a country club every day.
These are people that have declared bankruptcy?
Yeah, personal and corporate. To me, I thought if people filed for bankruptcy, they should be, like driving a Volkswagen and eating bologna sandwiches. These guys are, they're still eating better than I am, wearing nicer clothes, have huge holdings. The chances that you get what's owed you in my experience, have been almost zero. I've never gotten a dime.
Dr. Hill was quick to say that Marvin Warner has paid his vet bills. Next case, the former commissioner of Major League Baseball. For the 16 years he held that job, and even after he left baseball and formed a law firm, Bowie Kuhn worked in New York and lived in New Jersey. But when that law firm went belly up, guess where Bowie Kuhn ended up?
The firm filed for bankruptcy, and 5 days later, you declared that your main domicile was in Florida.
Well, what happened was, when I realized that the partnership was moving in the direction of making me accountable for all the obligations of the firm, I decided that was not really a very fair way to handle things.
How did Kuhn handle things? He bought this house outside Jacksonville for $1 million, moved himself and his $2 million investment portfolio to Florida.
Perfectly legitimate and legal. Nobody ever questioned the legality or the propriety of what I did.
Yes, they did. When Kuhn split for Florida, the firm's biggest creditor accused him of fraud. Kuhn still bristles at the charge, since in the eventual settlement, he personally ended up paying more than $1 million of the firm's debts.
If he had not come down here, if he had stayed in New Jersey, where he had lived for 20 years, would he have been nearly as protected as he was down here?
Absolutely not. He would have been totally vulnerable in New Jersey. As it was, what he got to keep was only because he had the thread of being in Florida and using that as the wedge to negotiate the settlement.
He negotiated saying, look, if you don't negotiate with me, I won't give you anything because I'm protected in Florida?
That's right. It's an all or nothing situation. And that was the thing that the creditors had to worry about, because if he were right, they would get nothing.
Nothing is exactly what most creditors get in Florida. And nothing is what most of Paul Bilzerian's creditors can expect to get as his bankruptcy case finally wraps up. In the meantime, he rattles around in that amazing exempt house.
My feeling, and you'll forgive me for this, is much more as a victim than anything else.
You know, he says he's broke.
Well, if he's broke, I would like to be broke like that, too.
If you want to know why Florida treats the bankrupt the way they do, you've got to go back 130 years when Florida was desperately trying to attract people to come down. That's why they wrote the homestead exemption into their constitution, to attract residents, any kind of residents.
This portion of 60 Minutes is sponsored by Wausau Insurance, the business insurance professionals specializing in managed care programs.
Eleanor, how's your daughter doing?
She graduates next spring.
Okay, can we get started again so that we're not here all night?
She'll be after his job soon.
As soon as we can. We will. Now, I think the company's got a pretty fair offer on the table here, people.
I don't know, John.
Look, isn't there anything that we can agree on here?
Other than getting a new coffee machine.
I know one thing.
Wausau for group health and workers' compensation. One thing employers and employees agree on.
At Compaq, we realized that buying a computer raises a lot of questions. So we came up with the answer, Compaq Presario. Powerful computers that come preloaded with software that can correct your spelling or balance your checkbook. In fact, the Compaq Presario can even answer your computing questions. Oh, and if you happen to have a phone, it can answer that too.
Hi, we can't answer the computer right now. Please leave a message.
The new Presario from Compaq.
AT&T says MCI only saves you pennies. So we just wanted to remind you how fast pennies add up.
So you switched from whole milk to skim and you're eating granola?
Oh, don't tell me.
Yep, it's loaded with fat. But Kellogg's low-fat granola has half the fat and every ounce of the taste. For today's granola fans, Kellogg's low-fat granola, now without raisins, too.
Standard TV and Appliances, giving you 46 years of great service guaranteed.
46 years of the lowest prices, guaranteed.
Now we're celebrating our 46 years with an anniversary sale for you.
We've lowered prices on dependable KitchenAid dishwashers, ranges, cooktops, and, well, many KitchenAid products are on sale.
Like this KitchenAid 18 cubic foot refrigerator with large door shelves for gallon containers and glass shelves for easy cleaning. All this, and it's only $5.99.
Standard TV and Appliances anniversary sale.
Going on now at 48th and Southeast Woodstock.
All week long, people were asking each other, do you remember where you were when President Kennedy was shot? We asked Andy where he was.
I remember I was shocked and sad, but I don't remember where I was. And does it matter? I probably should have a story, though. My story would go like this. I was sitting in my old office here at CBS when I heard the news that Kennedy had been shot. I'll never forget it. I was looking through some magazines that came that day. Life, Look, Time, Newsweek, the Saturday Evening Post. The magazines were offering some of the same hope-filled miracles they offer today. The Saturday Evening Post had hope for feeding the hungry. A cheap, nutritious food concentrate made from fish offers new hope to the world's starving. Where do stories like that come from? And where do they go? For that matter, where did the Saturday Evening Post go? Here's another story in Time. A diet that might wipe out malnutrition. Sure it will, Time. The day you don't have those inserts that fall out of your magazine. The cars in the ads don't look bad. I'd like to buy a brand new 1963 Cadillac today for $7,500. Some things are gone. Some things aren't gone. Studebakers are gone. Barbra Streisand isn't gone. Some words have changed. You forget that in 1963, black Americans, African Americans, were called Negroes. Lots of cigarette advertising. It would be interesting to know how many of these people have died of lung cancer by now. Unless, of course, they were just actors pretending to smoke. Lots of pictures of President Kennedy with his son, John. Heartwarming to look at that day. Heartbreaking to look at the next. Yes, I remember where I was when JFK died. I was 30 years farther away from dying myself. I'm glad this past week is over, though. I've seen President Kennedy shot 100 times on television. I don't want to see it again. I'd like to remember John F. Kennedy alive.
I'm Orly Safer. We'll be back next week with another edition of 60 Minutes.
Helen, I saw the Taiwan operations income figures today. They're terrific.
Well, actually, the way we structure a holding company...
Yes?
Most of that income will be lost to the Taiwanese tax authority. Hello?
No one offers you more international business expertise than KPMG Pete Marwick, the global leader.
The RCA Home Theater comes with a new optimum contrast screen for blacker blacks, brilliant whites, and a picture so clear and bright, you'll feel like you're really there. Buy select RCA entertainment products and we'll send you Nipper and Chipper.
Andre and Michelle are falling in love with America and their Park Avenue Ultra. They love the stopping power of Ultra's anti-lock brakes. They love the security of Ultra's dual airbags. And they have warm feelings about Ultra's available heated driver's seat. It's going to be a wonderful tour. Andre and Michelle are in love with a car that's as good as its name. Ultra from Buick, the new symbol for quality.